Clyde Do Something, our Canadian reporter, is here from British Columbia, where if you're a doctor, it's looking like if you don't get the COVID vaccine, or not just a doctor, really any healthcare professional. I looked it up, Clyde. It looks like it's like even if you're a nutritionist, I think, and you get a license, you are going to have to get the COVID vaccine in order to maintain your license. And beyond that, as its own concern, one thing I've read is that this could have basically open it up to all vaccines. So like the next vaccine the government decides everybody needs to get, you're going to have to comply with these government mandates in order to not just like keep your job if your hospital requires it, but to have a license, even if you're practicing on your own, you have private practice. Am I understanding this correctly? This is Bill 36.
Well, I think it's more dubious than that. What this does is we've seen during the pandemic, they had a push towards making nurses and practitioners have to take a medical intervention, take the vaccine in order for it to be a term of employment. This is different in the sense that it's not about the terms of employment, but the terms of being able to maintain a license in your field. And this is where this becomes a big issue. And essentially doctors, nurses, practitioners have to re-up their licensing through the college. They'll have a college of there used to be 24 different colleges in British Columbia for doctors and practitioners, College of Physicians, these types of things. These are governing bodies over which practitioners, there's the codes of ethics and all of these things that they have to work within those parameters that are decided by these colleges. What's radically changing with this bill is how that structure is laid out. They're basically coming in and firing all of the colleges, the boards of directors. They're amalgamating 24 of them down to 6. So there's going to be more centralized authority over the different fields. This is what I'm gathering from insiders in the industry. And instead of historically, what they used to do was vote on who sits on the board. It would be peers within their own industry, and they're switching it now to have the government appoint these people, and they don't actually even have to be medical professionals. And this is it's really insane what's going ahead. And there's so much to cover in what this bill does. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect being the new radical changes for opening the door to vaccine policy being a term of how the licensing is established for doctors or maintained. That opens the door for that. It hasn't been enforced yet, but this looks like the prerogative here in that instance. But it's not just the fact that that is a term of licensing now. It's also how the medical professionals discipline action goes. What's going to be put forward in this bill, as well as any disciplinary action, is going to be public knowledge after this. So there's a lot of concern in the industry if there's any complaints filed. We've seen in this letter here, they talk about the publication of disciplinary action. Making disciplinary actions public, even minor complaints, may harm public trust in health professionals and result in long-term harm to individuals' reputations. And that's a big concern from the doctors of British Columbia. Now, there's also discrimination and as professional misconduct. So essentially anyone with a grift could come in and file a complaint against a doctor, and then that would be a permanent thing on their reputation as a doctor moving forward. So anyone could use any little complaint at somebody and use it as a tool to take people out of their careers. It's really terrifying for physicians in this province that have already been under a lot of controls by the government and been put forward in a way. So it's hard to fill everyone in, because this has been such a long ongoing story in British Columbia. British Columbia is the last province to hold on to their vaccine mandates for nurses and practitioners. So they have not yet gone back to work. And this is well after the pandemic is. Most of the world has said it's over, it's done, but no, they're holding on to that, now making it a term with the licensing, not just a term of employment. We have if you, again, if you don't understand how it works here in British Columbia, in Canada, there's three political parties. There's the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP. So you have right, left, and lefter. In British Columbia, as a province, we don't have the right party. We have the left and the lefter parties, and the lefter party, the NDP, have been in power for some time, and that's really what's been going on here. And the unions that help are supposed to help these practitioners with grievances. They were fighting with the vaccine mandates, saying we should be let back to work. This is unlawful, and the unions have basically been gutted. Everyone left. There's hardly during the pandemic, a lot of them went on medical leave and other excuses to no longer be there. But what's happened is the NDP has such close ties with the unions and the union bosses that the unions have essentially become a shield for the government and grievances from these nurses that have been trying to file grievances, but they just go into the paper shredder of their local union that they pay for, by the way. It's an insane story, and it hasn't been on the news at all.
Yeah, let's talk about that real fast. Let me bring myself back into the stream. I was checking out, some of the comments here. Andy was saying that imagine the doctors leaving BC and remaining doctors can't handle the load of work and the medical system collapses. And actually, interestingly enough, I was just seeing this article that the premiers would demand a meeting with Trudeau to discuss increased healthcare funding. And, there's a lot here, but I saw and took note of this. The impasse comes as many healthcare facilities, particularly children's hospitals, are struggling with shortage of staff and overwhelming demand as a result of a combination of COVID-19, influenza, and respiratory infections. But the shortage of staff part, we're dealing with that here in the United States because, like you were describing, people left. They left their hospital work and either just quit their careers altogether, or they went into telemedicine or did something else because of these mandates. And, my audience, the people who know about what happened with my birth with our latest producer on the team, Jack, who's under the desk, and I'm rocking him, which one person I should add.
I was supposed to be on your show that day.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I had to cancel on you. Well, actually, no, I just ghosted you because I was in labor. And then
that's right.
You had tweeted, I'm going to be on Allison's show. And then everyone's like, I don't see you there. And you're like, dang, I guess you ghosted me. I saw the day later. Yeah, sorry. I was giving birth to a child.
All good.
But, we were, of course, hiking in a different state. So we took a little bit of a risk there, I guess. 37 weeks pregnant, hiking in Oregon. But that aside, our doctor released us to go back to our home hospital. He said we had time because my contractions hadn't started yet. It was just that my water broke. And so we called our home hospital in Washington and they said, don't come because they had unsafe staffing levels. The staff shortage was so low compared to, what they would need for us to come in. They had the beds and everything. They just didn't have the staff. And I said, well, what if we were at home? What if we didn't have a hospital in Oregon that it was near where we were hiking and we didn't already have a place to go? And she said, I would have told you to go somewhere else anyway, no matter what. Like, well, would you have any other options? I mean, no. Like, well, I would have, if somebody reminded us The Wedding Singer. I don't know if you've seen The Wedding Singer with Adam Sandler, where, his fiance ghosts him at the wedding. And then she comes the next day and she's like, I'm in love with the Robbie from yesterday, or from 4 years ago when you used to wear leather pants and all this stuff. And he's like, well, that would have been good information yesterday. And that's like what I wanted to scream at the nurse because I'm like, I'm in labor right now. And now you're going to tell me you don't have the staff to take us. But I've been seeing that everywhere. And so it's interesting that people are, picking up on that. And I'm just curious, like what you think about, they're already dealing with that there. And then, they're saying that the funding's not where it needs to be, or that there's this mess with that part of it. And then you add on to it that doctors are going to be required to get vaccinated, or not just doctors, but all the workers. I keep saying doctors. It's all healthcare workers. What do you think that does to the healthcare system?
Well, they're using the vaccine, or sorry, they're using the pandemic as an excuse largely in this. We've been having medical shortages for years. This has been an ongoing problem in Canada, and it largely has to do with how the medical system is run. The socialized medical system, it's socialized across Canada, but it's run largely by the provinces, and the provinces beg for money that the taxpayers have paid to the federal government, and then they beg for that money back so that they can put it into the medical system. And then they keep tweaking the rules on the doctors. They put more and more restrictions on them all the time, hoping that will incentivize them to do a better job. I'm not sure how that's actually been. Well, and we know how it's been playing out, because the incentives that they've been putting on them have been driving them out of their fields. There's less and less people entering the fields, and there's lots of people leaving. And it depends on the province too. So we have a lot of people, because of the mandates, have left the field altogether, or they left the province and went to another province. It's been hurting our medical system greatly. I mean, over the past, but again, like I said, this has been going on since before the pandemic. They're using the pandemic as an excuse. I think it's a failure of the system entirely. Now, what most people are unfamiliar with, especially from outside of Canada, we're one of the only countries in the world where there's a public option, but there's no other option. It's illegal to practice medical procedures. You can't do surgeries or anything like that privately. And there's been pushback. In Vancouver, there's the Canby Clinic, which has been doing precisely that and challenging the government on that. And it's been going to the higher courts, and hopefully it goes to the Supreme Court to rule that we can seek medical attention. We can seek doctors when the system fails us, because historically what it's been is there's the Canadian medical system, and then when that fails us, we have to go abroad. We have to go to America. We have to go to other countries, and people do that far too often.
Somebody asked, don't answer this yet, because I gotta promote my wine for a second, but is it true in Canada you can get assisted suicide for a sprained ankle? Let's talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
But first, you guys, don't forget, as the holidays are approaching, Christmas specifically is what are we, almost 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away. And you're going to be sitting down with people that you probably haven't talked to in a couple of years, maybe because you hate their decisions, who they voted for, or they just have bad breath, and you use the last 2 years as an excuse to never be around them. But one thing that you can agree on is the flavor, the just the way you're going to feel uniting over an amazing bottle of wine at an amazing price, which is why you should go to AllisonWinePromo.com and get 50% off of my favorite wines. Many of you all know they're very high altitude, one for almost 9,000 feet. I get asked all the time, why does that matter? Fewer pesticides, and the grapes work very hard to keep themselves alive under the sun at those high altitudes. And so it affects the flavor of the wine. It's very robust. The Rogue Malbec that you see on the left is my favorite. Also, as you see, you get a complimentary bottle of wine when you go to AllisonWinePromo.com right now. The one in the middle is from almost 9,000 feet, and the one on the right uses natural fermentation. Again, the Rogue Malbec is my favorite. They handpick the grapes. It's a very small, sustainable farm. These are not wines you get at the grocery store, and you don't have to get the COVID vaccine to go to AllisonWinePromo.com, which makes it even easier to access the best wines for whatever meal you're having. Okay, as I hear my other producer coming in, she's going to take over the show in a second. I'm now going to pass it over to Clyde, who's going to answer about this really fast, the ankle. Okay, you can have some milk in 1 second.
Well, before we get to that, you can't buy wine in grocery stores in Canada. That's a thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
the government runs all the grocery stores. This is a thing, unfortunately.
It's funny, I have him, in a bouncy under the desk right now, and I'm bouncing him with my foot. Somebody commented once that I look like a psychopath because I'm just like rocking, during the show.
doing the Bill Gates.
But my daughter's now she's 2, so she doesn't understand the stress. She's just pounding him right now with her foot. So I'm going to go get her some milk. I'm going to make you full screen. Go ahead. Go for it. I'll be right back.
Okay, so getting into MAID. MAID is the acronym for Medical Assistance in Dying in Canada. It's assisted suicide, or euthanasia, they call it. Now, this was brought in a number of years ago in Canada, and it was brought in. Well, it was brought in for, and the stated cause was there are some individuals that are at end of life, and they're suffering greatly. And it would be the dignified way to allow them to pass in peace and without all that pain. Now, arguments on the other side were this is a slippery slope. This is going to open the door to medicalized tyranny. With socialized medical system, which a lot of people already have a lot of complaints with and about. This will eventually lead to the idea of euthanizing people out of basically monetary reasons, because they become a drain, a burden on society. And that's exactly where we're actually going. There's new legislation being put through that will allow medical assistance in dying, as they call it, MAID. They want to, that's the propaganda, right? They may give it a peaceful, nice name, and that will make people feel better about it. But they're pushing it so it opens up the eligibility. They want to make it eligible for anything, basically. And one of the things is that they're stating is mental illness. So people with mental illness will now be eligible for MAID service, and medical assistance in dying or assisted suicide. And I mean, mental illness listed in the DSM is depression, and that is like the leading cause for suicide. And the whole idea here is where the Hippocratic Oath is taken by every doctor at first, do no harm. And what's really happening here is they're pushing in a system that does do harm, the ultimate harm, and that's ending people's lives. Now, how does this get into the idea of it being pushed on people for the sake of saving the state money? Well, Veterans Affairs recently was under fire because there's been a few cases where the Veterans Affairs have actually suggested to the people that were going to them, veterans, we're talking about people, armed forces that fought and were injured for our country, were offered, like, nonchalantly, for your PTSD, we don't really have a lot of money in Veterans Affairs, but we can offer you MAID. We can offer you an out, is essentially what they've been pushing forward. Now it's even more dubious. They've opened it up as well. There was I think the College of Physicians in Quebec, I believe it was, that was arguing that they should open it up for newborns up to a year old, given whatever circumstance is in that scenario. And they're also opening it up to what they call mature minors. Now, that's a term probably not a lot of you have heard, but the term mature minor has been pushed forward for the vaccines in Canada as well, where parents have not signed off to have their children be administered with the vaccine, but the children are being encouraged to go outside of the parameters of their legal guardian, and they're trying to make a legal framework to let people as young as 12 years old consent to medical treatments on their own, including MAID.
Somebody on Locals, and heads up for everybody watching somewhere else, or even if you're watching on Locals and you're not a supporter yet, if you sign up $5 a month to become part of my editorial board on Locals, alisonmorrow.locals.com, you can put questions in ahead of time for interviews for people like Clyde, go direct with some of the most censored people on the internet, and be part of my editorial board meeting on the weekends. Usually we do them on Saturdays, but I've had to kind of reschedule with live streams and stuff. So we're going to have ours tomorrow, Sunday. But anyway, alisonmorrow.locals.com, great way to support my work. Jim, Scuba Jim was talking about it here. I get it that it saves the health system money, but where can an ethical boundary be set? Some people who are depressed might be more easily convinced to end their life. Program seems very prone to ethical abuse. And then Canada Angela says, I think the most problematic issue for me with how Canada has implemented MAID is that doctors can recommend it. That floors me. The do no harm doctor should never offer the ultimate harm. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess you were talking about that. So it's interesting.
Well,
like somebody
else
was
add
talking
to that.
about.
I want to add to that. With new legislation that's coming through, it's actually opening the door so it may not have to be necessarily doctors, MDs. They may have it available to other practitioners. So while they're clamping down on what doctors can do here in British Columbia within their own practice and purview, they're opening up this MAID service to other physicians, or not even physicians, just practitioners like nurses and whatnot. I have to look at the bill exactly to see which fields are going to be opened up to this. But essentially, you just have to have two people in the medical field sign off on it, and you can have this procedure done, I guess, if you want to call it that.
And somebody else asked about, I'm trying to find it here in the comments. Okay. If it is a death pill given to suicidal people with nothing to lose, what's to stop them from poisoning others? Has that ever come up as a concern that people could give it to somebody else?
I don't know how it's administered. I actually don't even know the procedure for it. So I've heard of other talks of there was this Sarco. It came out of Switzerland or Sweden or somewhere. I can't remember, but it was a 3D printable apparatus that you could get inside. And what it used was nitrogen. It would fill the chamber with nitrogen, and you would just fall asleep and not wake up. So there's different methods of administering this. So I'm not sure exactly what they're offering. I just know that like the whole thing is just the fact that they're offering death to people is crazy to me. Especially, so there was a veteran recently where she was calling up to, because the first case was about PTSD, a head injury. This other woman, she was injured in the line of duty as a veteran, and she needed she was asking for one of those automatic chairs that go up your stairs, and she was offered MAID. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
What's actually happening here.
We have it here in Washington State. It's called death with dignity. That's what they call it. Okay, let me get you back to local. So I want to ask you this question. Actually, no, you know what? I wanted to go real fast back to this Bill 36 before we wrap on that one. So you were talking about how there's been like a media blackout on it. Again, this, if you're just joining us, this is the bill that essentially is going to mean that healthcare practitioners, and that could mean a chiropractor, an emergency room doctor, a nutritionist, anybody who has a license to practice, some kind of health related occupation, is going to have to get the COVID vaccine for licensing, not just to keep a job, but to even be licensed, and also could open up to other vaccines in the future. You said that you're just, a lot of doctors don't even know this is happening. The media is not picking up on it. What's your thought on that? Is that common with this kind of topic, or is there something specific to this you think maybe it's just flown under the radar, or they don't want it to cover it? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know in Canada, we in recent times, the media is in lockstep with the government. And if the government doesn't want a message to get out, it doesn't get out. It doesn't get out unless independents like us start reporting on it. Now, doctors in British Columbia are already under a lot of stress to keep up with what it is that they're doing. We all know how far behind they are in their practices, and they don't have a lot of time to read through bills and see what the government's doing. They're more concerned about their patients and what's happening with them and what's happening in their own practices. So it's completely understandable that these doctors aren't aware of what's happening, because they're not being told about it. And that's it. Like even their colleagues don't know to tell them. And then when the information does get out, a lot of them are enraged with what's going on.
Oh, it's interesting. There is a question. I guess I'll just keep us on that topic. Will the people of BC resist and refuse to comply? And does BC legislation usually spread to other provinces?
Well, so a refusal to comply will just end up with you losing your license to practice. And that's where this really hurts everybody. So if they do resist this, then they'll lose their practice. And if they continue to practice, there's penalties of up to 2 years or up to 2 years in jail for continuing. Do you
think though, if enough people did that they would rethink this?
Not historically. The way governments in Canada have been moving forward with when it comes to COVID policy, people emigrating, like leaving the country, hasn't changed their mind. People leaving the fields and not coming back has not changed their mind.
Has it just not maybe been enough to make it uncomfortable for the people in charge?
That's an interesting one, because it's uncomfortable for everybody else, but they seem to be very comfortable in what they're doing. And I think that's that's a tough one, because there was a large movement of people to protest against mandates. You may remember there was a whole bunch of trucks that went to Ottawa, our nation's capital, in February. And the response from the federal government immediately was to label them racists and misogynists and all kinds of other things that were absolutely not true about them. They were just average workers and people in Canada. And then from there, because they had labeled them such horrible people, there was no chance for them to go back on that and then actually negotiate with them to end the peaceful protests. So they declared a state of emergency and used what used to be the War Measures Act, known as the Emergencies Act. Historically, Justin Trudeau's father, when he was prime minister, used the War Measures Act against a group of protesters. It was a little bit more of a serious situation then. There was actually a sitting member that was murdered by the protesters at the time. But he went on to use that and abuse that piece of legislation to push forward things that he wanted in government. Now, after that, they rewrote the law, changed the name of it to make it more difficult to use. But then young Justin Trudeau used it on peaceful protesters in Ottawa. And most notably, the more dubious thing that he did, he did just have police go in and beat people up, but he froze people's bank accounts, like some real Banana Republic kind of thing. He froze people's bank accounts that disagreed with him on policy.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was really, it doesn't even just require that. Like here, I mean, we're not that far from it, but banks are already, we have a word for it now. It's called debanking. It used to be just deplatforming. Now you're debanked. Doesn't matter if you've debunked everything that the people who are debanking you have said, and you're the right person, you're the one in the right. Doesn't matter. You're still going to be debanked. It's rough, dude. It's rough to think about, like, the consequences of where life could lead if you stay on the path of trying to, uncover what's under these rocks and trying to keep secret. And it's not even just a matter of like losing your job anymore. You might not be able to access your bank account or what else. Like we've seen these tactics used by other governments around the world now that were historically seen as totalitarian governments. Right. Iran recently made it public that they were going to, because of the protests. I don't know if you've been following that. There's been protests about the morality police. They literally call it the morality police. That women who refuse to wear the hijab, they will be given a warning on their telephones. First warning, and the second time they do it, they'll have their bank accounts frozen. A play right out of Justin Trudeau's playbook. Yeah, it's fascinating. You're saying how for years, like those of us at least in the United States or in Canada, like you're saying, you're sold this idea that like we're the progressive, civilized, free part of the world. And I don't, and then, so then how easy it is to sell these policies to people has been the most fascinating thing to me, that it was so easy. I mean, I think that's the thing to me. It's not just the governments, it's the compliance of the people. I think that's probably more disturbing to me even than the leaders, because there are only a few of these officials. There's many, many, many people who complied. And I think that's just as problematic, if not more. Is the Liberal Party going to get away with slipping hundreds of pages of new gun bans into C-21 at the last minute? I mean, it's so bad. The CBC article is a little negative, and this is the article. Are you familiar with this? Yes, I am. So you want to talk about that? Yeah, what they did at the last minute. So it's amazing to me that people, you've heard this before about dictatorships rolling into countries and how it slowly happens, and then all at once. All of this stuff is happening all in a very short period of time here in Canada, but they were moving forward. We got an announcement months ago that Trudeau was going to ban handguns in Canada, and that was the piece of legislation, Bill C-21, that they were putting through, and it was supposed to basically end the sale of handguns or the transfer of handguns in Canada. Now, at the last minute, the very, very last minute, they came forward with a new amendment that is
that actually is now 85% of the bill. This amendment to the bill was much larger than the bill itself, including all kinds of other guns that they're going to ban on this. And they're going to be, at first they labeled it, well, it's only going to be center fire cartridges, guns that fire center fire cartridges and then eject them in a semi-automatic fashion. Then that slowly turned into break action shotguns and bolt action rifles and break action rifles, single shot rifles. And now it's completely just this arbitrary list of guns you probably have in your closet, guns you probably have in your lockup for going out hunting. These are sporting rifles. These are not weapons of war. They're not weapons that criminals choose. I believe there was one on there. There was a blunderbuss. I mean, it's so ridiculous what they're including in this. One of them was an Italian sporting rifle that's about $70,000 to purchase, and it's a decorative sporting rifle that only the hoity-toities go out to shoot birds. Like, this is how arbitrary this has become, and I think this is probably the penultimate step. This is banning a majority of what's out there. I think the ultimate step will be ban what's left.
Is this a pastime, plinking, referring to shooting tin cans?
Yeah, that's a pastime. Plinking is
okay.
So people would have like a really, really low caliber rifle. Most of them are the 22 long rifle is a popular one. It's not center fire. It's actually rim fire. That's why it went outside the parameters of what they were saying it was going to do. But they're basically like a gunpowder operated air gun. Like that's what a plinking rifle is. You couldn't take out something more than a gopher with one of those things.
Well, that's why I was wondering. It's like it's something that you should know. Reading this article, you would already know a Plinkster. Like I wouldn't know. Maybe they call it that here too, and I'm just an idiot. But that's one of the guns that they're saying here. One version of the Plinkster is individually listed for prohibition in the amendments, even though this guy Murray Smith, technical specialist with the government's Canadian firearms program, said that it's not going to be affected by it. So it's hard to know like who's telling the truth, I guess, when it comes to some of this stuff.
Well, anyway. the big thing that happened in Parliament just the other day was Rachel Dancho is a Conservative MP. She shouted across the aisle that they were lying, and what they were lying about was they were saying that the Conservatives were being obstructionists when it came to putting the bill through, when in fact it was the other way around. It was the Liberals and the Bloc Québécois, you may know them as the Separatist Party of Quebec, that wanted to initially separate from Canada. They were tabling discussions on this, and they were not inviting the Conservatives to even come to the table to be a part of the discussion. So she was told she had to apologize. She refused to, and she was kicked out of Parliament the other day, and that at least gave her a chance in the media to raise her objections to this bill. But Canadians across the country are objecting to this completely, and it seems to be just the federal government, the elites on the Liberal NDP and Bloc Québécois side of things that are pushing this through, and it's completely against the will of the governed in this country.
Bruh, Sarah says, I just listened to your description. Nothing is left. Nothing any American would call a real gun. So,
yeah.
Okay. And then some encouragement here from Andrew. You're doomed. Your own people are voting for this stuff. It's a slow moving disaster. So yeah, just some encouragement from the chat.
Well, I keep calling them the zombies, like it's the zombie apocalypse, and the government in Canada, it's been doing that. So we heard about Bill C-11. Maybe your audience is a little familiar with it, and it's the internet censorship bill here in Canada, under the auspices of protecting Canadian content creators. It's going to ruin the industry for digital first creators in Canada. But the idea of this is, first it came as Bill C-10, and it was killed. It was killed. They took it out in Parliament. It didn't pass. Well, only a few months later, it came back as Bill C-11. If it doesn't pass, it'll come back as Bill C-12. It's just a zombie coming for you slowly, and it won't stop. It doesn't stop. It's just going to keep moving.
Okay, a month ago, a Canadian politician named Preston Manning announced the intention of a citizen-led inquiry into COVID. I have never heard of a citizen-led inquiry. It sounds inspiring. What does Clyde know or feel about this? They're seeking nominations for commissioners to lead the inquiry. How about Viva? But he can't because he's a Floridian now, but Clyde could.
Yeah, I'm a British Columbian, so I'm far away from Ottawa, but I could always go down there and join it. If I was invited, I would definitely come join it. But Preston Manning, he was a founder of a conservative party in Canada. He's well known, well respected in Canada, and he's heading this citizen-led inquiry. And his idea behind that is there's been so much corruption in government these days. If they had a real inquiry into the response to COVID, nobody would believe it. Nobody would watch it. Nobody would care. Nobody would want to even, be a participant in it, because of how, I mean, government transparency is what they keep saying, but we get anything from them, it's all redacted for solicitor client privilege or whatever reason they want to redact everything. So a citizen-led inquiry, the criticism for that is that it won't have any teeth. If it was a government-led inquiry, it wouldn't have any teeth either. So it's more about the court of the public opinion. We're going to get the information out there, and we're going to have a lot of people be able to have this dialogue. And I think it's an important thing that we have a dialogue about what the government did and how they responded to COVID.
Will they ultimately translate the recent euthanasia approvals into medical protocols or guidance such that doctors could be threatened with licensure and removal if they don't either offer, recommend, encourage, or insist upon it as treatment in certain circumstances, like vaccine protocol?
So that's part of this Bill C-36. So this would go based on the provinces. So because healthcare is run by the provinces, any compulsion would go through the legislating body. We're setting into it a framework where this could be the case. This could be a thing. One thing I forgot to even mention, like I said, it's a huge story. This Bill Bill 36 in British Columbia. Historically, the last word has always been from the doctor. The last word as an authority on anything medical would be the doctor and talking with the patient. Now that authority is being undermined, the final say is going to be the colleges, and these colleges are now going to be led by politically appointed bureaucrats.
Let's go to this one. What's with Trudeau giving away billions? I read he wants to ban hunting rifles. Okay, we just did that one. How did the hearings in Parliament end up? Was he guilty of imposing the act illegally? Giving away billions.
Okay, well, he's giving away billions to everything, every one of his liberal causes, the war in Ukraine, all the different things that he wants to give away money to. Not a lot of it's going back to the provinces. I know there's a push these days, and the grumblings have started, and I'm fully in support of this, is to reel back Revenue Canada and take back the power of taxation to the provinces and have the federal government beg the provinces for the money. And I think that would be a good step in the right direction. Of course, it's just grumblings as that we're having now, so it's not even being pushed forward into legislation. The second part of the question was to do with the inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act. We finalized the evidence gathering portion of that. It's still ongoing discussions with the Commissioner Rouleau and legal scholars and people of the like. And they have a due date on that, and that is February 6th, I believe. And then it has to be tabled by the 20th in Parliament to be discussed, the rulings of Commissioner Rouleau and what his decision was, whether it was justified or not, but we're not quite there yet.
Over on Rumble, and we have a good crowd over there watching, is the premier, or whatever you call it, of Alberta making progress? Tropical Rocket asks.
Yes, the Sovereignty Act passed yesterday, and we're excited. They were saying, of course, if your audience may not know about this Sovereignty Act, it's the sovereignty in in a united Canada. It's got a big long name, but it's the Alberta Sovereignty Act, and what it does is it was a piece of legislation pushed forward to say to the federal government, if you want to impose anything on us, we can basically squash it. We have final jurisdiction over things that we have jurisdiction over. And the federal government, they have jurisdiction over things like the borders and whatnot. But they've been overreaching into provinces on a number of issues, especially when it comes to energy and pulling energy out of the ground, when it comes to farming, when it comes to a number of different issues. And the government's been overreaching, and they've made this push to say, now we have a piece of legislation that will hold you back and hold you at bay. It passed unanimously. It was 27-7 in the legislation, and we're excited to see that. And also in Saskatchewan, a similar bill passed.
I'm too sad at the decline of Canada to even have a question. That's the final one. Okay.
I'm with you, Lord Loser. Nice name of the Cornelius.
Any final thoughts, Clyde, before you go? I appreciate your taking the time and dealing with kids and all that good stuff.
Don't forget about us, America. Don't forget about us. We're your brothers and sisters up here in the north, and yeah, we're going through some times here in Canada, and it's tough for us, and we're pushing. We have a lot of support, and we have a lot of good people behind us. But yeah, don't forget about us, and tune in if you want to know what's going on in Canada. Tune into my channel, Clyde Do Something, on YouTube.
I wanted to gotta pull that up, Clyde Do Something, and you haven't gotten censored yet, have you?
I play by the rules. So here's the thing.
Oh, that's not fun. No, I'm just kidding.
No. So I do think I try to, sometimes I have to use clever wording to not say things that are against the terms of service on YouTube. I did get a warning a while back because I did cover the story of the Pfizer documents that came out under court order. YouTube spanked me for that one. And so if I do cover stories like that, I'll put them on Rumble exclusively, that kind of thing. But I do stick to where my biggest audience is, and that's on YouTube. So yeah, tune into me there. But the way I keep my nose clean, and I know what things you're allowed to say and what things you have to be vague about in other ways. But yeah, bring in people the news about what's happening in Canada.
So somebody in the chat just gave me a heads up about this. I feel like I should do a separate video about it, but just to make you feel better. Hey, Allison, have you commented on Jay Inslee? That's our governor here in Washington. His permanent vaccine mandate. He's like God Emperor of Dune. And so looking it up, next step for Inslee's permanent vaccine mandate. Elizabeth Hovde's been on before. I'll have to get her back on to talk about this whole thing, but looks like Washington state employees and executive and small cabinet agencies are going to be stuck with Governor Jay Inslee's outdated COVID-19 vaccine mandate as a condition for ongoing employment. And new employees and executive and small cabinet agencies will also be mandated to have an initial vaccine series. Boosters will not be required, making the whole mandate look a bit silly, which is, I'm not going to read the rest of this to everybody, but yeah, this, listen, my agency that fired me over my YouTube channel and, my podcast, they still have a mandate. And my old boss will probably run for governor to replace Jay Inslee, Hillary Franz. She's a director, or the Commissioner of Public Lands, head of the Department of Natural Resources. And I think they kind of like move lockstep. It's like maybe same thing where you are, the way these parties work and the folks who are just like, in the funnel to become the next leader or dictator or governor or whatever you want to call them, they're not going to think for themselves. So like if the current governor is doing this, then like the next person who wants to take his role, if they're heading an agency, like this is what our party's doing. And we don't want to, we're not going to stand for anything different. We're too scared and sheepish or they believe what they're doing. They're totally brainwashed into, like, it doesn't even make scientific. The whole idea that you would be forcing people to get a vaccine, which even you believe, like your people, you could debate this all day long, but like your people say is essentially outdated, and you're still making people get it. there is no science there. It's crazy to me. So the only other option I think is like, it's like you just don't want to admit you're wrong. Your ego is so powerful that you can't even see it yourself. You just got to stay with it. I mean, there's just so much you could psychoanalyze about it, but our state is not far from what you're describing. It's not everybody here, obviously, Clyde, but if you're in, you're in state government, and you work in where Governor Inslee has authority, that's it. And, you think about it too, like from the hospital perspective, but government perspective, or like the news stations who have had these mandates, you basically have whittled your staff down to not just people who have complied with these choices that have an effect on their physical body, but because they have made those choices, they're probably somebody who thinks a certain way, or they were too scared, or whatever. They complied for one or another reason, and you've basically gotten rid of all of the obstinate folks, and how that like changes things long term with the practice of journalism. If your entire news staff went along with this, or the practice of government, if all of your staff went along with this, I mean, because you likely now have a lot of people. The heterodoxy, if there ever was any, is gone. You basically whittled everybody down to homogeneity. And, how does that affect the way that you deal with the public from here on out? I mean, that to me is also something that we don't talk enough about. But thank you for letting me know about his stupid permanent mandate. I'm not shocked. He'll be out of office soon, but don't worry. My old boss who fired me is probably going to run and win. So we'll have more years to have Clyde back on to bitch about it all. Sorry, did I say that? Yeah. Office, he's sleeping. So that's that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but we could also wrap it up.
Well, it sounds a lot like what's happening here. And it's really pushing people out of the fields. And yeah. I mean, it's no good. It's bad news. It's bad news for everybody. And the idea of coercing people into doing something is not, it's not a liberal ideal. And when I say liberal ideal, I mean like classical liberalism, what the founding of our nations are all about. And that's about people being able to manifest their own destiny and make decisions for themselves. And this whole idea of coercing people into a medical procedure it's egregious. And yeah, you're always going to have a faction of people that will not comply under any circumstances. Yeah,
I guess, like you said, I mean, it's just so far not enough of that for those in charge to be uncomfortable. A lot of other people have been very uncomfortable. And in our country, it's going to be dictated by the lawyers, I think, eventually long term, but it could take years and a lot of money, and a lot of people don't have the money to fight. And I think one of the other sort of big takeaways for me over the last couple of years is how like we apparently, the people, are the ones responsible for constantly keeping tabs on our government and making sure they don't break the law. It's like we have to pay for their lawyers, and we have to pay for our lawyers to fight them. Mm-hmm. And they just break the law, and we have to prove they didn't. It should be the opposite. It should be like, you should prove to us that you're not breaking the law. Like, you should pay, you know what I mean? Like, we should not take you to court. You should be constantly having to prove, like, but we're the ones who have to pay for the attorneys to prove they're breaking the law. You should prove to us that you're not breaking the law. That should be like, it shouldn't be the onus on us. I mean, it's just nuts to me how much effort, like, I guess maybe it's been like that for a long time, and it's just, I've awoken up to it. But I think I
think that's what it is. I think a lot of people, like myself, I even said this on Twitter the other day. I was saying, I always just paid my taxes, and the government left me alone. It was the government that broke that arrangement. And now I'm an activist, and I'll continue to be an activist until we get back to that arrangement. And then I can just go back to being happy, paying whatever taxes I have to pay, as long as it's not too egregious and they're not getting involved in my life. And yeah, that's what I'm hoping to get us back to.
Okay, well, you can hear my daughter in the background.
I can.
She's telling us to wrap it up.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Clyde.
All right. Thank you.